Okay, by now, most of you know that I will be out of work for another 3 weeks. To make my life more fun, $2.50 a pump just to stretch my legs. I took a walk around the neighborhood. I'll be honest, 75% of my neighbors are jerks, but the few I like, I'll stop and talk to. I was telling my friend Brian about my septic problems when I learned that he's been in the business for 11 years. It's not your tank, he said. I'll bet you 6 beers that your filter is clogged. I didn't even know septic tanks had filters, but they do. Brian explained what I needed to do and then spent 20 minutes telling me about the things he had found in septic systems. One job particularly stood out. He took the lid off to check the filter and found it clogged with almost 30 condoms. He joked with the homeowner, suggesting they start throwing them in the trash from now on. But then, he noticed how pale the guy got. Apparently, in their 18 years together, he and his wife had never once used a condom. How did that turn out? I asked. Hell if I know, Brian replied. I cleaned the filter, he wrote me a check, and that was that. But when I left, he was wearing a pair of kitchen gloves, carefully collecting all the rubbers in a little bucket. I laughed, but my amusement was short-lived. As I walked back home, Beth came running into the living room, screaming. The toilet exploded. Apparently it had. Knowing full well that Beth wouldn't deal with it, I cleaned up the bathroom and went outside to check the drain plug. The moment I opened it, a flood came rushing out, soaking me completely. I sighed. I was going to need a shower. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was already dreading how much an emergency plumber call would cost when Beth walked past me with a suitcase in her hand. I'm going to stay with my sister until you fix this, she said. Call me when you're done. I watched her go. Then I went inside and stripped right by the back door. Screw this. I was taking a shower. The water might just drain into the backyard at this point, but I didn't care. As the water washed over me, I thought about my life. Married for 18 years. One daughter, 17. Working as a counselor at a summer camp. Saving every dime for college. I thought about Beth and the growing distance between us. It seemed I was even more clueless and clumsy now than when we had first gotten married. Intimacy was a thing of the past. She was only 41, still good-looking. Maybe it was a woman thing? I had read about early-onset menopause in the doctor's office last month. Maybe that was it. Either way, her attitude was starting to rub off on Amy, and the pain on my daughter's face when her mother left was more than I could bear. We were going to talk when Beth got home. I had reached my limit, and frankly, if she didn't like it, I didn't care. I was tired of living in a toxic environment. After cleaning up, I decided to head to the pub, eat one of those great burgers, maybe have a couple of beers, and if I needed to use the restroom, I'd do it there. As I was leaving, I saw Gus picking up his evening paper. The light bulb went off. Gus used to run a sewage treatment service. He probably had connections. Maybe he could get someone in. I stopped to chat, and after a few minutes, I asked him, "You want to save $250? He asked. "Damn right I do." "I bet the tank isn't full," Gus said. "I think your filter is clogged. All you gotta do is clean it out. Tell you what, I'll come by tomorrow after church and show you how to fix it." I was so relieved. I invited him and his wife, Mabel, to the pub. They spent the next 2 hours telling me about the weirdest things they had pulled out of septic tanks. Mabel, who had worked as a dispatcher for the company, had some stories of her own. One woman lost her wedding ring and paid to have the entire tank filtered in search of it, only to find it behind a plant on her kitchen counter. Another guy followed them to the dump after flushing $80,000 worth of cocaine down the toilet, thinking the cops were after him. They did find the cocaine. He got a nice, long prison sentence. The next day, Gus and Mabel showed up at my place at 2:30. We found the septic lid and pulled it open. "There's your filter," Gus said. "Clear as daylight." He told me to hold the hose while he pulled it. About halfway up, he started grinning. Mabel lowered her eyes and chuckled. "I found your problem, Chad," Gus said. "You might want to throw those in the trash from now on." I looked at what he was holding. My filter was full of condoms. 23, as I found out later. I stood there, dumbfounded, wondering how a pack of condoms had managed to get into my septic system. And then I realized exactly how. Something must have shown on my face because Gus and Mabel fell silent for a moment. Mabel cleared her throat. I'm sure there's an explanation, Chad. Maybe you've had visitors lately? Or maybe Amy had some friends over when you weren't there. Really, Mabel? I cut in. You think I've had happy guests over enough times for them to clog my filter? Or that my 17-year-old daughter is suddenly hosting orgies? There was only one explanation. Gus and Mabel spent another 45 minutes trying to talk me down before they left. After they were gone, I put on some thick rubber gardening gloves and carefully collected the condoms. I triple-bagged them, placed them in a plastic container, and stuck it in the small freezer on top of my store-bought refrigerator. Then I went inside to think. Damn it. A lot of things suddenly fell into place. We were done. No negotiation. No apologies. A consummated marriage. Only one thing kept me from pulling the trigger. I wanted to know who it was. I didn't bother calling Beth. Let her stay where she was for a while. I needed to make a plan. I spent the rest of the day at my store. The next morning, I picked up Amy. I hadn't seen her in 7 weeks. She gave me a big hug and told me all about her summer adventures, arguing with 11-year-old girls who thought they were 20. Really? That young? Man, am I getting old? I laughed. It wasn't until we were almost home that she asked about her mother. I told her about the septic tank. So, it's already fixed? She asked. Yeah, it's already fixed. Does Mom know? No. I tried calling last night and this morning. Remember, she was supposed to be with me when I picked you up? We had a whole day of family activities planned. Amy frowned, pulled out her phone and called her aunt. Is Mom there? No, honey. Your mom's at work. Oh, good, Amy said. Then she paused. Then why did everyone say she wasn't there when I called? Silence. Her aunt stammered. And just like that, I had my answer. Better call me back from the office phone, not her cell phone, in the next 20 minutes. If not, I'll have my dad drive me to check on her. And if she blew off her own daughter over some stupid business, that little bird is going to sing to her dad. I know something. 20 minutes. 30 minutes later, she called out of breath. Hi, honey. I'm so glad you're home. Yeah, I realized that when you came out to meet the bus. I had something come up. I can just bet. Goodbye, Mom. She called me, ranting about how disrespectful I was. Well, look who taught her. It'll be tomorrow before the tank is pumped out. Amy's going to be at my parents' tonight if you're interested. I won't. I hung up the phone and looked at Amy. She sighed. So, you found out about it. What are you going to do about it? And before you get mad at me for not telling you, I found out about it at summer camp. Jenny, my best friend, had a cousin named Tony, who has a boyfriend named Jack, who lives 3 houses down from us. He told Tony what he saw, who told Jenny, and Jenny told me. Well then, it's straight from first-hand experience. That must be gospel. Sarcasm doesn't suit you, at least not with your daughter. I was going to tell you about it tonight. What are we going to do? You're going to graduate high school, have a senior prom. You're probably going to end up in a single-parent household. No matter how old you are, the judge will probably let you choose who you want to live with. I'll respect your decision if it's your mom. Just tell me you won't cut me out of your life. What do you think? I think you're a pretty clueless guy most of the time. Of course, I'm going to choose you. I could never manipulate her the way I can manipulate you. She spent so little time with us, even in the same house, that I bet she wouldn't be able to pick me out of a crowd. But what I really need to do right now is get the taste of camp food out of my mouth. I would kill for a decent pizza or a good burger. So if you want to get to the heart of your only child, do it through my stomach. I took her to the local pizza place and watched her destroy 3/4 of a large meat lover's pizza with added cheese. She leaned back in her chair, burped, and asked me what I was going to do about her mother. She acted mature and tough, but I could see the little girl in her eyes. This was going to be hard for us. I took her hand. Let me tell you, Andy, what my priorities are. First, I need to be absolutely sure I'm handling this right. In the coming months, I need to figure out how to minimize the impact of the divorce on you. Right now, you are the #1 person in my life. I want you to be as safe and happy as I can make you. A lot depends on how your mother reacts. I promise you that I will do everything I can to keep you out of the center of things. But, Pumpkin, if what I suspect is true, my marriage to your mother is over. It had been a surreal conversation with our daughter, but I've always asked her to be involved in important family decisions since she turned 14. Of course, some decisions she couldn't participate in, but I tried to involve her in everything else. When she was 15, we needed a car. Although Mom wanted a small sports car, she agreed with me in favor of an SUV. I ended up driving anyway, taking Tony and her friends around the neighborhood, and Beth got her little car the following year. I was the one who taught her to think before making a decision and to consider all sides before giving advice. This has benefited her by making her a born leader and confidant for her group of friends. You need to figure out how to keep the house, at least until I graduate, then give it to her if it helps you financially. I'm still going to declare, right? The money will be there, won't it? I hastened to assure her. Honey, there's enough money in your endowment to get you through the first 3 years. Even if your mother doesn't help, I'll have plenty of time to find the money to pay for your last year of schooling. I give you my solemn promise. We returned home, and I left her to unpack and think. By this point, I only wanted to know 2 things about her mother: how soon we could get a divorce and which idiot she was sleeping with. In the end, it was pretty simple. All the high-tech gadgets you can buy online can't compare to a good old-fashioned camera trap. Well, maybe I misspoke. The camera traps I borrowed from my brother were state-of-the-art. When activated, they took a 30-second video before moving on to taking photos. They gave a timestamp and could be programmed to zoom in when activated. They even had audio recording, but they were usually so far away from their subjects that they picked up almost nothing. It took a little brainstorming to figure out how to hide them, but with my brother's help, I built 2 birdhouses, each hiding a camera. I hung one on a tree by the driveway that activated whenever someone drove up, and the other on a pole aimed directly at the front door. I didn't need to see them doing nasty things. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. She said something ingratiating about putting up birdhouses at the end of summer, and I told her it was to let them weather out so the birds would think they were a natural part of the yard. Of course, I blew full-blown smoke. What the hell did I know about how a bird chooses a nest? She just shrugged and ignored them. Here's how it worked out. She worked for a company that had a flexible schedule, so 2 or 3 times a week, she took 2 hours off for lunch, working overtime or coming in early to get her work done. Her boyfriend must have worked there as well. She got home 30 minutes before he did, grabbed a sandwich and threw off her clothes. He'd show up, they'd be busy doing that for about 30 minutes, then get dressed and leave. She'd go back to work, and he'd leave time until his return. Sometimes, he'd stay at my house and have 1 or 2 of my beers, homebrewed beer that a friend had supplied me with. I'm surprised I hadn't noticed it sooner. Maybe Tony was right. Maybe I really was clueless. Damn childish. But when I found out, I put all but 1 or 2 of the beers away in the refrigerator at the store. They were old-style bottles with ceramic caps and rubber washers, about 24 ounces full. About once a week, I took the lid off the septic tank and pulled out the condoms. They were busy little bees, averaging 2 per session. Not surprisingly, she had no enthusiasm for me. Most of the time, she was in a completely preoccupied state. It took me 3 weeks of careful preparation, but everything was set up and ready to go. I wouldn't let Tony be there when it all happened. No one deserved to see a parent humiliated the way I intended. I thought about inviting the neighbors over, but then changed my mind. Instead, I set up 2 video cameras and started filming them. Brian had an old boombox that used cassettes. I put it next to my dresser, where it was barely noticeable. I tried to time it so that the boombox would go off right after they stripped naked. The tape was started, a blank tape at first. Until it hit the sounds I had recorded, I checked the speaker, and it was loud. Boom! The sound of a shotgun blast and the crack of wood breaking. I went to Habitat and bought an old door, which I set up in the woods and shot. As soon as the shot rang out, they heard me scream. Very little of it was acting. I had a lot of pent-up rage and I let it out. You lying fool. The shotgun went off again. I'm going to shoot him below the waist. I bet I've watched this scene 100 times, and I still can't keep from laughing. They flew out the front door and rushed to their cars. All he was wearing was a white shirt, pants, jacket, and a tie he was holding. Later, I found his box on the bedroom floor. I walked around the house and headed toward him. He screamed like a girl and jumped into his car. That's when he noticed the gift I had left him. I took 2 20L buckets, dipped about 15L of septic fluid and a few solids into each condom, and divided the condoms equally. Just before the tape recorder went off inside, I put them in the driver's seat. Kudos to that dumbass for leaving his car unlocked in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Beth came running out, screaming. She was wearing a white blouse that she was trying to fit into at the same time she was trying to pull up her brown skirt. Obviously, I got to them before they got down to business, or he hadn't bothered to take them off. But she was wearing a white undershirt. I'd never seen her in one of those. Filling her car with condoms wasn't difficult. She rigorously locked her car, even at home, but I had a key. She fiddled with her keys as I headed toward her before I realized the door wasn't locked. She jumped in, opening the door, and tried to start the engine. Took about 15 seconds for it to get to her. Her skirt was still up. I stood there, taking pictures and laughing uncontrollably. I think it had gotten to her what I had done. She screamed at me, struggling to get out of the car. I slammed the door shut, nearly hitting her leg. Don't even think about getting your covered ass outside. Better yet, keep going. I'm still taking the lid off the septic tank. I could get you inside and close the lid. You could probably last an hour or 2 paddling doggy style, but eventually, you'd get tired and just slide underwater. Now that I know all I have to do is change the filters, it might be another 20 years before I have to pump it. By then, all that would be left of you would be a few big bones, and I doubt he'd be sucking them into his hose. The more I think about it, the more I like it. I pulled out my keychain to unlock the door. She put it in gear and backed out. She took out one neighbor's mailbox and knocked over another. She flew out of our cul-de-sac with frightening speed. "Hey!" I shouted, knowing she couldn't hear me. "This is a 40 kilometers per hour zone. Slow your ass down. This isn't a residential area. It's a neighborhood." Okay. I was a big fan of Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor until I found out what an idiot Bill was in real life and what Richard had turned into. That line was from an old comedy album my dad had. I can't remember who exactly said it. I told Tony what I had done, leaving out a few details. When she came home from school, she was shocked that her old man could do something like that. But then it impressed her. And people wonder who I inherited my personality from. It's just priceless. You're not angry about the way I treated your mother. Non. You didn't physically hurt her, and she kind of deserved it. I bet she'll remember this day for a long time. Now come on. You can help me pack her things. And be careful. You've already gotten your revenge. So we carefully packed her clothes, cosmetics, and jewelry. When Tony found her underwear, she took a pair of scissors and cut everything in half. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Mom's not answering her phone, she told me as she walked out with the last batch. She's at Aunt Gwen's. I just talked to her. I think she owes Mom a debt of gratitude for covering up for her little adventures. It's a shame Uncle Jack found out anyway. I'll be right back. You've got her in your crosshairs right now, Dad. Maybe we should think about changing the locks tomorrow. It was 3 hours before she came back. Mom was just desperate. She kept saying over and over that it wasn't meant to be. I think she's feeling some serious remorse about her choice. If you can believe it, she wants to come home. I convinced her to give me a few days to calm down. Aunt Gwen followed up by asking me if I thought I could get over it and take her back. I just smirked and got into my car. I was still in full anesthetic mode and asked to notify her at work. Gwen was supposed to come and pick her up. By hitting first, I got temporary custody. Even though I threatened to show everyone my tape, she contested the divorce and convinced the judge to schedule counseling. I was adamantly opposed, but my attorney advised me to suck it up and play along. 8 sessions. To my surprise, some of it I even liked. The woman we visited was our age, moderately attractive and well-built. I noticed she didn't have a ring. At the very first meeting, she asked us what we hoped to get out of these classes. Beth went first. I want my husband and daughter back. I want to come home and rebuild our marriage. I kept a nonchalant expression on my face. Then it was my turn. I would tell you that this is a waste of your time, Miss Turner. But it's not, because whatever the outcome, you'll still get paid. Don't worry. I will do my best to remain calm. I will indeed participate to the best of my ability. But I wouldn't want to stay married to Beth for anything in the world. She's ruined everything, and the damage is too deep. What I expect to get out of these sessions is your written opinion that this marriage is unsalvageable. So let's get started, shall we? I'm sorry you feel that way about this, Chad. I think, why are you apologizing, Miss Turner? We have to be. Honestly, here's how I feel, and I'm okay with my decision. Why should it make me sad? I think I caught her off guard. Well, I'm here to help you find your way to talk about your difficulties and see if we can resolve them. Minus Miss Turner. Really, I'm not lost. I don't need help finding my way. My path is clear, and I can see only one set of footprints on it. I already have my solution. As far as I'm concerned, you're here to try to force me to accept an alternative that I find completely unattractive and impossible. But hey, I'm paying for these sessions. I should at least get some entertainment value out of them. By all means, keep going. I got her, Chad. Mr. Jones, you know I have to report to a judge if you don't cooperate or participate. It could work against you. Am I being uncooperative? I think I'm being very proactive. I've done most of the talking around here. And Miss Turner, I don't respond well to threats, veiled or otherwise. That's one of the reasons I tape these sessions. I put my little tape recorder, which had been running the whole time, on the table. Mr. Jones, you have no right to tape these sessions. Why not? You can and I can't? As the person paying the bills, I'm entitled to the assurance that I'm paying my money for what I deserve. I won't let you do this. Now I stand up, taking my tape recorder. We're done here, Miss Turner. Tomorrow I'll formally request another therapist. If I can get to a judge, I'm sure this tape will play an important part in his decision. I wish you a pleasant evening. I left both her and Beth with their mouths hanging open. My lawyer convinced the judge to appoint someone else, an older woman who didn't care if I taped the proceedings. It went pretty smoothly. There were many instances where Beth begged for a second chance, and I said no. The only heated conversation occurred when she tried to convince both the counselor and me that it was just a brief affair, that she had overreacted, that she wanted to get it over with blah blah blah. I pounced on her with my whole body. I'm not sure how timelines work in the cheater world. How long does an affair last, as opposed to a full-blown ongoing affair? Is an affair less destructive to a marriage? I know for a fact that you've had contact 41 times in at least 6 or 7 weeks. 41 times. It wasn't an affair. Neither of you were going to stop before you got caught. 41 times, it took a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. It wasn't an affair, Beth. It was a carefully planned plan of action. You guys were pretty smart. Could have gone on for years if you hadn't clogged the sewer pipe. But you got caught. Pretty dramatic, I thought. I couldn't help but laugh lightly. Beth went to her sister's house, and the sister wouldn't let her on the doorstep until she had undressed and thrown her clothes in the trash. Even after 5 showers, she still smelled. The repairman cleaned her car, but she had to replace the driver's seat. I don't know what happened to her lover, but he went to jail about a week after Beth. I never showed anyone the video I took, but word got out. Brian heard about it and nicknamed me the condom. I think her sister leaked most of the story. A few weeks later, after having a little too much to drink at a local bar, classes were pretty boring. By the 4th week, we were just doing all the required activities. Beth was crying, and I remained stoic. The counselor announced it on the 6th session. And 4 months later, Beth and I were the proud owners, at least in my case, of a set of shiny new divorce decrees. It seemed to me that the agreement was quite reasonable. In lieu of child support, Beth was to pay half of the mortgage on the house and continue to contribute to Tony's college fund. There were only 10 payments left, so it was pretty much a wash. As soon as Tony graduated, we sold the house and split the money. We got a good price, even with the economic downturn. I took my half and bought a house 5 houses away. The lot was bigger, it had an extra bedroom, and there was even a pool in the backyard, the only one in the neighborhood. It was a rush sale, and I bought it for about 2/3 of what it was actually worth. I only had to finance $20,000. It was like a car loan. I paid it off in 4 years. Tony was doing well in college. She started bringing 2 of her roommates to her house over break. I found them summer jobs, and when they had a day off, they would lay by the pool as little as possible. I ended up with a lot of college-aged visitors, men and women. I became something of an urban legend now. Even at work, most people call me Condom. I was a department manager in a company that made brake parts for high-end cars, mostly Mercedes and BMW, but also Bentley and Land Rover. I was earning what many shift supervisors in other factories were earning. I was good at my job and my bosses were happy with me. I didn't even think about a relationship until Tony went into her 3rd year of college. I didn't really want one. Oh, I'd had a few girlfriends with benefits over the years, but nothing serious. Then Colette went to work. She was asked to head up another department. We talked mostly about work, but once a month the managers would go to the local pub for some fresh air and relaxation. After 3 months I asked her out and she said yes. There was a spark there, but we took our time with it. It took almost 4 months before we started to get closer. I felt that if she was going to be in my life, she needed to know my story. So, I told her the whole story of why I got the nickname Condom. She seemed a little surprised, then had a hard time hiding a smile. Soon, she was laughing. Then, she told me her story. She was married, like me, to someone very much like my ex. Apparently, he liked unusual intimacy, and she had only tried it once and was traumatized. There was no preparation. She would get used to it, was his motto. Since she didn't, he started rounding up playmates who would agree. Colette told me that when she found out, she bought an old blender at Goodwill, put on rubber gloves, took some scissors, and scooped up a blender full of poison oak and ivy leaves. She grated the leaves, sifting them through a sieve until she had about an ounce of juice left. Then, she took a hypodermic needle and carefully inserted it into the half-empty tube, putting it back in its hiding place. A week later, she got a call from the hospital. They had to rush her husband there. Apparently, he was having a severe allergic reaction to something. She laughed. When I got there, he was lying on his back, his robe pulled up because he was extremely sensitive to touch. I swear, he was so bloated he looked ridiculous. I was talking to the doctor, and he was trying to determine the cause of this reaction. I looked at my husband like he'd been murdered. Well, I told the doctor. He has a habit of sticking that wretched instrument wherever he goes, and to whomever he goes. Maybe it was the poison ivy juice I put in his lube. Do you think that could be it, honey? The doctor had a very amused look on his face, and one of the nurses dropped her clipboard. Don't come home, honey, or next time I'll do something irreparable to your junk. Doc, if you have a patient here with the same symptoms, you might want to check her out. You'll have a nice evening. As I was leaving, I heard the doctor tell the nurse to check on the women in room 312. It was on the same floor, so I popped in. She was lying on her stomach with her ass up. She was so swollen and red. I swear she looked like a space alien. She couldn't see who came in because of her position, so she asked if I could give her something stronger for the pain. I slapped her ass so hard I thought I had broken my arm. She screamed, and I leaned over to make sure she could hear me. It won't take away the pain, but it will give you something else to focus on. I am the wife of the man you slept with. I put poison ivy juice in the lube. Next time, it might be acid. Think about that the next time you decide to steal another woman's husband. I drenched myself in sweat for days, waiting to be arrested, but I guess divulging the secret was worse than their punishment because I never heard a word. I just stared at her with my mouth open while she looked tense. Suddenly, I smirked. I think I love you. She smiled back at me. You should know better. After a few more months, We decided we did. Tony loved her and understood when she couldn't bring her roommates the next summer. We needed bedrooms. Colette had a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. Tony and her daughter, Joy, were bridesmaids, and her son, Bill, was walking her down the aisle. It was several months before we settled into the family apartment. When the time came, Tony showed the joy of graduating at her old campus, and 2 years later, Bill received a tennis scholarship. We are a few years older now. The kids came here for our 15th wedding anniversary. Tony is married and has 2 children. Joy has 3 children, and Bill brought her husband and adopted daughter. The grandkids were splashing around in the pool. The kids were watching them and cooking. We just sat there like honored guests. From where I was sitting, I could see a small piece of jewelry on the fence. Colette was quite a talented artist, and she painted accents on our mailboxes, birdhouses, and fences. The one I was looking at was so tiny, it was barely noticeable. An inflated condom with poison ivy curling around it. A reminder, she said, we never needed it. As for what happened to Beth, who the hell cares? The end.